that continues over the next couple of days as soccer gets ready to begin. Brian Dunseth covers it, talks about it on Sirius XM, and joins us from time to time. Dunny, how are you?
I'm good. How's the holiday weekend?
Everything was pretty good. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. It continues to be pretty good in Orlando for Major League Soccer. Is your expectation that we do kick things off on Wednesday?
Yeah. So there's a bit of a concern, and you kind of already touched on it. FC Dallas. This was kind of the conversation originally about the length of this tournament. MLS wanted all their teams down there. So should there be a positive test upon arrival, in conjunction with obviously the travel and being on the planes and being on the buses, all the things, that, you were in a controlled environment, you could separate, and then you could test. Well, I think, and this is, so I think this is part of the bigger picture of the conversation surrounding coronavirus is there's kind of this fine line of trying not to publicly shame anybody. But I think when you're talking about the due diligence and how these teams have essentially been testing, and more testing in their individual markets, there's an air of confidence. And I think, unfortunately, I keep utilizing the analogy. This stuff's kind of like glitter. Once it's in the air, you don't know where it's going to fall. And unfortunately, an FC Dallas player did test positive and inevitably kind of passed it on. And we're hearing maybe some of the same reports that are happening with Nashville SC as well once they arrived. And their flight had already been delayed 24 hours because of a questionable test. So besides testing and kind of these false negatives we're seeing, there's a lot of concern. But from everybody that I've spoken to, multiple teams, players, they feel really, really safe inside that bubble in Orlando.
Well, that's been my case all the way along, Dunny, whether it was Major League Soccer or whether it was the NBA. We're going to have tests and positive tests happening a lot in home markets as you're kind of living your life at your home. But when you get into a more confined environment, again, that's not going to eliminate the positive test, but nothing is. I hate to quote the PGA Tour commissioner, but he was pretty spot on a couple of weeks ago. He said, this virus isn't going away. Even when there's a vaccine, it will still be there. We have to learn to live and function with this. And Major League Soccer is part of that too. But my thought has always been, when you get in Orlando, no bubble is perfect, as we're kind of learning as we go here. But they are relatively confined. The testing will be there. I think once they're there, I think we'll see the numbers, maybe I'm wrong, drop a little bit. And I think once you're kind of confined and in your kind of same environment all the time, seeing the same people all the time, I think your chances of positive tests probably go down a little bit in Orlando versus being in your home markets.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And I think that was the exact quote from someone that I was speaking to saying, listen, I feel safer here than I do in my home market. everything for the most part is, you feel as though everything's been thought out. He's like, when I'm home, I'm going to the gas station, get my car washed, going to the store, I'm grabbing food. I'm around people. Like here, at least it is a controlled environment. So, it's social media. I think anytime there's any type of negative announcement, it all blows up. But I think ultimately it's one step forward, and they're going to be tested every other day. So that's the hope. And we talked about Bundesliga, we talked about La Liga, we talked about Serie A, we talked about the Premier League. The Premier League announced over 2,000 tests today. Not one positive. So for all the games that are being played, I think we're one step closer to kind of the home and away of an MLS regular season right around the corner.
I hope that's the case, and I just hope this goes off. There's going to be positive tests. There's going to be a player of note probably that may test positive, and then it's what I've said all along. As long as they're not getting wildly sick, you push them aside. You treat it like they pulled their hamstring, and they're out 10 days to 2 weeks, and then you bring somebody up, and in this particular situation, it's an injury. You isolate them, you treat them, the professionals deal with them, but then it's the next man up, and you hope it's not a key component on some team, but it very well could be, and then you just have to adjust. This is a small tournament in a bigger picture of things. This is not the NBA trying to finish their season. This is Major League Soccer trying to kind of restart their season as best they can.
Yeah, and on top of that, you and I both know, we've talked about this a ton of times, both publicly and privately. Athletes, they're a hygiene cesspool. They are disgusting human beings. And anyone who's ever been in any type of locker room knows what it's like. Well, magnify that from college and professional sports. And, how many times have we talked about the flu being passed around the team or staph infection? So you're right. I mean, this is one more thing that I think is going to be managed. And at the same time, Bill, I would say hygiene protocol is going to be better and tighter than it's ever been.
That's what I was about to say, Dunny. If anything really positive comes out of all this, maybe cleaner locker rooms and cleaner athletes. You know what I mean?
Well, I would say cleaner locker rooms, the athletes part. I'm not sure. You and I both know. So, yeah, but I mean, all joking aside, I think it's, talking to Theron Inns, the head athletic trainer for Real Salt Lake, it is fast-forwarded, I think, the opportunities to throw things against the wall and maybe change what the normal operating procedure once was.
Who was the grossest teammate you ever played with and any of your stops? Whose locker you wanted to stay away from? Who was, I mean, again, you're going to write the book someday, but I don't think you're outing anybody here. You don't have to go into graphic detail, but give us a name of somebody who was pretty nasty.
His name was Eric Denton, and he played for the Columbus Crew. And I think I just broke the statute of limitation for the state of Ohio by naming him publicly. It's the air of invincibility for professional athletes mixed in with kind of guys living their best lives or whatever they think that version of their best life should be. Compounded with, God, we called them dirty dents. We joked around about it. But there's guys where you just look at their own individual hygiene and you're like, dude, my man, like you're going to be single for the rest of your life. So yeah, I'd say all of them. Dents there's more stories about dents around Major League Soccer than probably any other professional soccer player in the history of MLS.
He is the walking history of Major League Soccer. He is Brian Dunseth with us here on the Bill Riley Show today. I'm curious, Vela being removed from the tournament, he's going to play for LAFC at some point this year, just not in Orlando. His girlfriend is pregnant, due to have a child, so he's going to stay back for that. What kind of an impact does that have on the tournament overall, not having the league, arguably the league's best player, but what kind of an impact does that have on LAFC?
It's huge. It puts more pressure on Adama Diomande, and then the acquisition of Bradley Wright Phillips as a free agent in the offseason. Carlitos Vela right now, his partner's pregnant, as you said. They already have a 3-year-old daughter. The birth was going to happen right in the middle of this. Chicharito from LA Galaxy, his Mexico international partner in crime, in a very similar boat. And it's one of many storylines, but this is probably the biggest because it's the league MVP, and he's opting out. Now, listen, you and I have talked about this. If you were talking about a single version of me, I'm in Orlando, no problem. If you're talking about right now with 3 kids and a wife, it's a different conversation. So those that have the doctor's note. Oh, and by the way, Jonah Dos Santos from LA Galaxy isn't going as well.
Right.
And I'm using air quotes for minimally invasive hernia surgery, which I've never heard of that before because I've had a hernia, and I can tell you it's super invasive surgery. I think what we'll hear, Bill, is not just guys that are injured, not just guys that have partners that are pregnant, but we're also going to hear stories about people that are going to choose not to go because either they're foreign players, maybe their partners don't speak English, maybe their partners don't have driver's license, and maybe there's significant concern about kind of the autoimmune issues, or maybe it's just that, the psychology of leaving your partner and your children for up to 7 weeks is kind of a no-go. Nobody signed up for that. So I think we're going to hear more and more conversations. But to your original question, it's devastating for LAFC, but in a way, it might actually help Bob Bradley because at some point he's going to have to play games without Carlos Vela if there is some type of long-term injury that LAFC has to deal with.
Speaking of Mexican internationals, what does it say that Major League Soccer and Atlanta United is landing an international star in the prime of his career in Jürgen Damm?
So I was actually texting with Carlos Bocanegra, Atlanta United general manager, about this. Jürgen Damm a couple of years ago was probably on just the forefront of like a $20 to $25 million move over to Europe. And when he made the move to Tigres, his playing time and his form kind of dipped. He had some issues off the field that got him in a bit of trouble, but he's kind of cleaned up his act. For those that want to follow, for those Spanish-speaking followers of the show that want to follow a great kid on social, I highly suggest following Jürgen Damm because he's hilarious. But, yeah, this is a huge one, and I think it's, one more step forward of kind of the generational Mexican internationals coming to play in MLS that aren't at peak career. The Carlos Velas and Chicharitos are big, but I think the Adolfo Pizarros and the Jürgen Dahms are even bigger because that's going to kind of make it look like MLS and Liga MX are on par and isn't going to punish those players from playing with the Mexican national team, and obviously helps that Tata Martino, former Atlanta United head coach, is the now Mexican national team head coach as well.
Brian Dunseth with us here on the Bill Riley Show. RSL won't play till Sunday night. They'll play Colorado. If you watch and look at some of the soccer experts around the country making their thoughts and things heard on this tournament, nobody has much of an opinion about Real Salt Lake. Nobody thinks they're going to get out of their group. You tell me, though, they're going to be a different team than they were in March when they had only played 2 matches. Everybody is relatively healthy. But you give me an idea of what your expectations are for RSL in the bubble down in Orlando.
Yeah, I would say in these type of tournaments, kind of depth of the squad mixed with the amount of youth that want to play and the development of the development academy players and players that have played for Real Madrid are going to, I think that's completely overlooked and undersold by quote-unquote the experts. And by the way, anything that you read from the quote-unquote experts, use it as toilet paper because it's so BS. I mean, they don't know. Nobody knows when you get down there. It's a complete reset. Some teams are going to be flying and some teams are going to be horrible. I mean, you could be Bayern Munich or you could be Schalke, win every game or not win at all. So I look at Freddie Wars' team, still the same thing. And again, we've talked about this. The biggest, I think the biggest compliment I can give Freddie is that he knows his squad really, really well. And he's going to set his team up to get the best possible result that he can. My biggest challenge has been to Freddie, figure out a way to play the same way on the road that you do at home. And by that, I mean with a real striker, with substance and with identity and with possession and put on a show. Because, the days of Jason Kreis and that, vaunted 4-4-2 with the diamond and going to multiple finals, those were really important days. And I think that's why everybody looks so fondly upon Real Salt Lake. I think this roster is light years ahead of what Jason Kreis had with regards to the strength of the starting 11 plus the depth of the roster that he has. But again, the biggest challenge is going to be utilizing that depth and actually putting his stamp on the game. Because I think he's got the opportunity with these type of players, with Corey Baird, with Sam Johnson, with those type. I mean, you can have a true 9 in that position and you can score goals and do it in a stylish way.
What should the expectation be for Sam Johnson? I didn't know what to make of him last year, Brian, because for what they paid for him, and again, he scored, but he was utilized more, I think, in the Petke regime, especially as an energy second half guy, and maybe that was a fitness issue. Maybe I just didn't know enough and they didn't tell me enough, but I didn't feel like he was utilized to what they needed him to be utilized. And maybe know better whether that was a Sam Johnson issue, whether that was a coaching issue or a strategic issue. But what should the expectations in year 2 be for him for Real Salt Lake?
So I would say that all parties involved have to have more accountability on the way that he's being used and what he gives the coaching staff to use, if that makes sense. 9 goals with limited starts. If you put his numbers, his minutes to goals up there, it's up there with some of the best in the league. And you put him on some of these explosive teams, like put him at LAFC or Atlanta United, Sam Johnson's a double-digit goal scorer. But, I don't know, Bill. Tell me if I'm wrong. Has RSL really had a real number 9 since Alvaro Saborio?
They have not.
All due respect for your Movsisian, but, the stuff on the field and off the field with Ura, that led to a dramatic breakdown. And I don't ever think that Ura really hit the heights of expectations when he came back. So I think for Mike, and this is not to try to disparage Mike Petke, I think where he was great, he could set a team up to go anywhere and compete and get points. But that came at a cost, and that cost was playing a real number 9, playing a guy who's egotistical, cocky, flashy goal scorer that has zero responsibility for playing any type of defensive role. And, you know, you're stretched at the depth of your roster when you're asked to play a player like that. But I think Sam showed that when given the opportunity, he could play. Now, it didn't help in the preseason when he goes down with a knee injury. It doesn't help in the regular season when guys like Dami and guys like Albert haven't really played with a real 9. They kind of played it in conjunction with one another. And then I think ultimately Sam didn't help himself. But I would say Douglas Martinez, coming from Real Monarchs, is going to challenge him in ways that he wasn't challenged previously. And so for Sam, my hope is 10 goals, but I would also say the same thing about Douglas Martinez, because you don't have to have one guy scoring all the goals. But if you get Douglas, Sam, and say Corey Baird to pitch in 30 goals, Bill, we're having a different conversation about how RSL finishes in the Western Conference.
I completely agree with you. That's why I'm anxious to see how that unfolds and see where as much of what Freddie will do, but as much as where Sam Johnson is as well. All right, before we go, how long till we see good on-the-field soccer? I have a hard time believing July 8th, 2 days from now, when Orlando and Inter Miami get together, it's going to be the beautiful game. It will be soccer. There's no doubt about that, but I don't know how beautiful it will be. How long do you think it will take for these guys to knock the rust off before we get pretty good soccer?
Well, back to my Bundesliga reference, for Bayern Munich, it didn't take any time. For Schalke, after 8 games, they still hadn't knocked the rust off, and that's why they didn't win a single game. I would say that the fitness levels are going to be higher than people are expecting, because now that essentially you've had 6 weeks of training, and yes, some of that was individual, some of that was as a team, and it's going to be in Orlando. I still think that the fitness won't be the issue. Now, the sharpness and, you know, some of the prolific goal scorers in the league, will they be finding the back of the net, you know, with every shot that comes off their foot? Probably not. But I would say by game 2, we should see as close to kind of the first couple of games of the season as you possibly can. Because inevitably, as you said, there'll be that rust because it's going to be kind of that preseason feel. But I would also gently remind everybody that's why these first 3 games in the group stage, MLS put importance on them and made them count towards the regular season. So I think it's inevitable that, yes, we won't see the best soccer, but I think you're going to see everybody leave everything on the field because points do matter, even if it's only, you know, a total of 9 points through these first 3 games.
Dunny, that too, and after you've been sitting for 3.5, almost 4 months, you don't want to be eliminated and then have to sit around for another 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks till you play again, right?
Yeah, that's true because I haven't had it confirmed, but I'm hearing August 15th is that date where we could see MLS go back to home and away in whatever new format that we're going to see in Major League Soccer. But there's also a human element to this, and I'll just remind everybody that once you get past these first 3 games, I don't want to say people are going to tank, but I mean, you know, the quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, where there's that $1 million bounty on the line that you can take home and put in your bank account. I think you're going to see some teams kind of rotate squads and inevitably say, hey, let's just get home. You know, games are games, but let's just get home to our families if we're not going to make it, if we don't have a strong enough team to make a run to the finals, because guys aren't going to want to try to get back to their families because 6 weeks is a really long time. And I know that sounds crazy for everyone sitting at home and listening, but yeah, they're professional athletes, yeah. But none of these players in any league has been away from their families for 6 weeks. It's usually 2-3 weeks max, and then they're back home. So back to that human element that we always talk about with the athletes.
Who's your favorite to win this thing?
I would have said LAFC, but I would say I think Sporting Kansas City has to be in the conversation. Everyone would want to say Atlanta United, but we know Joseph Martinez from that ACL tear. I don't really put him in the mix as well. So I think it's going to come out of the West. So I'd say right now, Sporting Kansas City and probably the Seattle Sounders, maybe on paper, have the best starting 11. But I think RSL surprises a lot of people because of their depth and their ability to kind of plug and play so many young players.
Be exciting to have sports and back and soccer back and Real Salt Lake soccer back, too. Hey, thanks for coming on today. Be safe. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, my man.
Thanks.